Till now we discussed markets and the forces of supply and demand determines equilibrium price and quantity in a market. And two key players in the markets are buyers from the demand side and sellers on the supply side. Now, often in the literature or in popular media, here you have heard the term competitive market. So what does this word competitive market means in real life? So in today's lecture, first we'll focus on the characteristics of competitive market, especially from the context of economics, and then we'll try to find out how a firm maximizes profit under a perfectly competitive market. So here's the first characteristics of a perfectly competitive market, which has large number of buyers and sellers. Often that's why it's said in a competitive market there are infinite number of buyers and sellers. Now, what's the significance of this large number of buyers and sellers or infinite number of buyers and sellers? That means each individual is only a very small part of the total market, which has a very key implication, which we'll be talking about very soon. Next characteristic is that all the products that traded are identical products. That means they're exactly the same products no matter who the seller is. So in a competitive market, there's nothing called Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts or McDonald's coffee. There's only one commodity, that's coffee. Similarly, in perfectly competitive market, there is no Pepsi, no Coke or no Dr. Pepper. There is only one product, which is soda. Obviously, this is not a very realistic assumption, but again, competitive market is a very idealistic situation, which barely exists in the real world, but it's a benchmark on which all the other markets are characterized. So next important thing is information is available to everybody, which means that anybody who is a participant in the market, that consumers and sellers have exactly the same information, and since they have exactly the same information, that's why they are able to take the best decision possible. Again, this is not a very realistic assumption, and often the information that people have are different, and we already talked about asymmetric information in the market, and that's, if you remember correctly, that's why we have a hierarchy in the labor market. Again, we'll just assume it for the sake of assumption because we are trying to create a very idealistic situation. Next, each buyer and seller is a price taker. Now that's the direct outcome of the fact that there are many large number of buyers and sellers. What this price taker means, that means neither buyers nor sellers should be able to set the price of the product. All they observe is the actual price in the market, and if they feel like buying, if they are demanding at that price, they'll buy it. That means a buyer cannot haggle prices. And if a seller wants to sell at a particular price, again, which is the market price, which is already given to the seller, if they like it, they will sell it. That means here they have no market power, and market power associated with the ability to set the prices on somebody's terms. So in a perfectly competitive market, because of large number of buyers and sellers, everybody is a price taker, no matter who the person is. And finally, there are completely free entry and exit of the market. That means any firm who wants to enter the market will enter it. Any firm who wants to leave the market, they should be able to do it without paying any cost. Similarly, if you are a buyer and if you want to leave the market, you can do so. If you are a seller and if you want to leave the market, you can do so as well. Which is, again, idea here is that there is no restrictions on the movement of goods and services or entry and exit of any kind of buyers and sellers. So these are the key characteristics of a competitive market. And as I said, these are not very realistic, but again, we are trying to create a very idealistic situations. Now question is this: if it's a competitive market, how do we analyze it? What are the characteristics of the competitive market? First we'll focus on characteristics of revenue and cost under the competitive market. Now first important thing, we'll know that in a competitive market, marginal cost curve is upward sloping. That means it goes up. Average total cost is U-shaped. Marginal cost crosses average total cost at the minimum of average total cost. And finally, price is equal to AR equal to MR. So AR represent average revenue and MR represents marginal revenue. So question is, how a firm maximizes profit under a perfectly competitive situation. So let's try to understand that using our cost and revenue curves. And remember, profit maximization condition, profit max condition is always MR equal to MC. So we already know from our previous lectures that a firm maximizes profit at the point where marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. So we are bringing back our previous lectures here because now we are analyzing a specific kind of market called the perfectly competitive market. So let's try to understand how the firm maximizes profit. So first we'll measure cost and revenue here and quantity of output. Output here represents goods being sold here on the horizontal axis. Remember, one of the characteristics of perfectly competitive market is that price is equal to AR equal to MR, which essentially means that in a perfectly competitive market, your demand curve or price should be equal to AR equal to MR. That means it's a flat line. This is also the demand curve. Now we'll not get into details why it's also a demand curve. Only thing you need to remember that under a perfectly competitive market, your demand curve is flat, which is also equal to your price, which is also equal to your marginal revenue, which is also equal to your average revenue. Now we know the cost behaviors. We know generally the average total cost is U-shaped. Then we'll draw average variable cost. Average variable cost is always below average total cost. We know that because of the universal cost behaviors we have studied before, but it starts here and it gets closer and closer. That's your average variable cost. And finally, we have marginal cost, and I'll draw a marginal cost which starts here. And marginal cost intersects average variable cost and average total cost at the minimum point. And we all know where profit is maximized. Profit is maximized at the point where MR equal to MC. And how much quantity will be produced here? Quantity will be produced Q max. That's the quantity that will be produced at this point. And what's the price will be charged? Again, price would be P star here, right here. So this is a case where it shows the profit will be maximized under a perfectly competitive situation at MR equal to MC. Now, how much is the profit? How much is the cost in this scenario. So we'll just name these things. We'll just call it O, and we'll just name it E, and we'll name this F, and we'll name it G, and H, I. Okay, so in this particular diagram, your total revenue, remember total revenue is price times quantity. So total revenue is price times quantity. In this case, what is the price? Price is equal to OP star. Quantity that sold is OQ max. So total revenue would be OP star times OQ max, which gives you the area P star OQ max E. So this is this whole shaded area is your total revenue. So this big P star EOQ max is your total revenue. How do you find total cost? We know total cost is average total cost times quantity. We know at Q max how much is the average total cost. Average total cost is FQ max or OH. At Q max, average total cost is OH. Q is OQ max. So your total cost is OH times OQ max. That gives you the area H O Q max F. So let me mark it. So this is your total cost. So this box is your total cost. So if you subtract total cost from total revenue, what's left is your profit, and your profit is represented by this box here. So profit is the box P star H F and E, which is nothing but is the total revenue minus total cost. So this is how we represent a profit, total revenue and total cost in a diagram. And always remember, in a perfect competition, you have a flat or horizontal demand curve, which is equal to price, which is equal to average revenue, which is equal to marginal revenue. And the behavior of other cost curves like average total cost, average variable cost, and marginal cost will follow exactly the same pattern or universal patterns that we have studied before. That means average total cost, average variable cost, and marginal cost are all U-shaped, and marginal cost intersects average total cost and average variable cost at its lowest point.